At the very outset, let me extend warm revolutionary greetings on behalf of the Left and Democratic Government of Kerala. As you already know, today we have assembled here to discuss the far-reaching consequences of the national education policy and other measures taken in the educational field by the present NDA government at the center. We have assembled here to register our protest against such retrograde measures and to build up resistance and defense against attempts to rob the democratic rights prevailed in the education sector in Kerala. I think it's better to call this document as a policy of exclusion than a policy of education. In order to understand the possible dangers implicit in the present national education policy, at first we have to locate it or contextualize it in the present socio-political situation prevailing in India. What are the specificities of contemporary socio-political climate in our country today? We have fallen prey to both political fascism and religious bigotry. The secular fabric of the nation is being torn ruthlessly. There is the conscious distortion of history. There is the conscious distortion of representation of certain sections of society. There is the systematic erasure of the subaltern sections, classes, caste, and gender altogether from what is counted as social and cultural history of Kerala. Those who were relegated to the margins, that is, the minorities, the Dalits, women, and transgenders, are further pushed to the periphery. Through creating an atmosphere of animosity, through politics of hatred or politics of intolerance, and unleashing violent onslaughts on these marginalized sections, the politics of exclusion is getting strengthened. Communal polarization gets intensified through the very acts and approaches of the rulers of India. The central government have proved themselves as anti-minorities, anti-women, anti-Dalits, and anti-people. Certain sections of the society are othered and alienated through constricted versions of nationalism. I would like to draw your attention to the recent episode of erasing the references to Mughal dynasty from the history texts of NCERT. The reference to Darwin and his theory of evolution also seems to be vanished. The periodic table, which is an inevitable tool in chemistry and other sciences, also has been removed. The intellectual centers of the nation are being hijacked through clever maneuvering. The key positions of these intellectual centers, like JNU, are given to the supporters of Hindutva fundamentalism. It is in this context that we should go through the proposals of the NEP 2020. The NEP 2020 as an educational document has certain serious gaps, silences, and contradictions in it. NEP, with its profusely verbal acrobatics, appears to address all the concerns of modern education, but covertly and cleverly smuggles in the specific agenda of the ruling party through the fissures and gaps in the ideological structure built up by the policy document. Actually, NEP has not been subjected to any legislative or social scrutiny. It has bypassed the parliamentary procedure. It was not discussed in the parliament in a detailed manner. Through a travesty of social audits, it has invited public opinion through UGC, but totally disregarded the replies. NEP 2020 comes after 34-year-old National Policy on Education 1986 policy document, Rajiv Gandhi's Challenges to Education, a Policy Perspective. An educational policy should scrutinize the impacts, merits and demerits of the previous policy documents. But NEP never makes an attempt to study the impact of the previous policy documents. Moreover, the document was released with any empirical data or studies. Most of the time, the document revels in a remote past, in the glories of ancient India. What was the situation in that so-called golden period? The society was highly hierarchical, pyramidal and unjust. The majority was kept in darkness through the denial of education. It was a place where egalavias has to cut their thumb if they pursue studies. It was an age which proclaimed that Shudras and women, if they ventured to study Vedas, molten lead should be poured into their ears. That society with rotten feudal values was full of atrocities perpetrated against the backward and weaker sections. The present NEP, through its enthusiasm to glorify that ancient India, is trying to go back to the pyramidal and highly hierarchical social structure like that of Varnashrama. The document keeps complete silence on the constitutional values like secularism and democracy. It never mentions the need for reservations for the socially and economically backward sections. The elimination of the socially and economically weaker sections from the field of education will be the effect of such approach. In the present Indian context, these silences should be treated as severe, serious or criminal. In the present regressive atmosphere, this can be a silent assent for othering or alienating certain sections from the field of education. In the present socio-political situations, where communal forces join hands with global capitalism and corporate forces, we can clearly see this document as a vehicle for communalizing and commercializing education. The document will surely contribute to the intensification of the process of commodification of education. Besides accelerating the process of commercialization, communalization and elitism, this document urges to impose centralization, denouncing the federal principles of the country. The NEP calls for the complete dismantling of the affiliating system of colleges. The ending of the affiliating system will be detrimental for the students from the rural areas, especially the tribal students from the hilly and coastal areas. Regional availability of educational facilities is important in the case of access. Despite the claims of NEP, it has failed to identify and address the socio-economic challenges faced by India's educational progress. While the cost of quality education continues to rise, particularly with the advent of self-financing educational institutions, an increasing number of students is forced to drop out even before completing a minimum level of education. The NEP involves a paradigm shift in education system that is highly retrograde. This shift is from a conception of education as a means of nation building to one that prepares students to become mere fodder for neoliberal capitalism. And for this, they are given a dash of cultural chauvinism. The word Indianness is being repeated in the document many times, but the definition of Indianness is too narrow and constricted. The repeated assertions of Indianness paves the way for the very narrow concept of the nation in the present situation. The variety, plurality, and diversity of our nation is the wealth of India. But unfortunately, instead of seeing this multiplicity and cultural polyphony as an asset, the NEP dismisses it as fragmentation. The word used by the policy document is fragmentation. For the NEP, the cultural diversity of India is a burden of the nation. In the document, there is no mention about funding in the field of higher education. UGC has already been reduced to UEC, University Education Commission, a mere facilitator for the private self-financing establishment. The NEP visualizes an education that conforms to the interest of a corporate Hindutva alliance. The field of education will be confined to a socially and economically privileged elite. Nowhere in the document is there any mention of reservations for the Dalits, OBCs, or other deprived groups. Its total silence on reservations suggests an unwillingness to continue with the socially and economically disadvantaged groups. We have already seen what the central government have done with the scholarships for the socially and economically backward sections. NEP envisages an education system that is full of doors that lead the students out. Its major impetus appears to be exclusion rather than inclusion. Multiple exit. The student can leave the college after the first year itself. He or she will be getting nothing out of the first year. Students can go out and walk in at different stages, enjoying apparent freedom. But in reality, the system relegates the socially disadvantaged groups, the women, the working class, the historically oppressed caste groups into the ghettos of education. Exploiting the need for employment, the education system outs the student into the global job market with bare minimum skills that will ultimately benefit only the corporate employer, not the student. The vision is that a few, depending on the needs of neoliberal capitalism, will acquire an education that will enable them to fill executive and official positions in the corporate world. The others will be thrown out from the prospects of education with some given skills to do menial jobs. Those who receive and destined for corporate jobs will have a curriculum that imitates of metropolitan universities from America or elsewhere. This detaches education completely from Indian situation. To camouflage this imitativeness, the NEP suggests imbuing students with what is essentially a Hindutva type of chauvinism. So we can see a kind of over-centralization, neglect of the federalist principles of our country. From the primary level, pre-primary level, that is Anganwadis, to PhD, everything will be controlled by a centralized agency, Rashtriya Shiksha Ayog, which is being presided by the Prime Minister. Everything will be regulated and supervised by a centralized agency called Rashtriya Shiksha Ayog, presided by the Prime Minister of India. The NEP terms it a slight but tight regulation. The aim is to redefine India as a homogeneous, monolithic category, sabotaging its heterogeneous identity. The topics of research will be dictated by a centralized agency, that is National Research Foundation. The topic of research and research problem should be resulted from the inquisitive mind of the researcher. It should not be thrust upon from an external agency. Homogenization or unified syllabus will obliterate differences. Such an approach will dismiss the local and specific cultural nuances of different societies in India. At present, the government is cleverly manipulating through the UGC for over-centralization without regarding the federal principles and the cultural specificities of different states in India. All universities should have the right to continue with their specific organic nature, their own cultural and social specificities. The states should have a say, a space in playing their role in the field of education, as it has a far-reaching effect in the rebuilding of society. The complete dismantling of the affiliating system will surely end up with the exclusion of the weaker and marginalized sections from the higher education system. The attempt is to convert every college into an autonomous institution. Though academic autonomy is desirable, the kind of autonomy that the private managements require is financial and administrative autonomy, which will exclude the poor and the underprivileged from the portals of higher learning. This is a move in the direction of complete retreat from the part of the government from the field of education. Rampant privatization of education, along with its blatant commercialism, will undermine and eliminate the high ideals from the higher education to convert it into a structurally adjusted neo-colonial economy. In Kerala, we are trying to build up a people-centric model of knowledge society which can be function as an alternative model for the present NEP. We have increased budgetary allocations for education, especially higher education, and we are trying to improve the physical conditions of government-managed institutions, both in the school education and in the higher education sectors. We are trying our level best to build up a new knowledge society, a people-centric model of knowledge society, an inclusive society where secular values and scientific temper will be promoted so as to secure the harmonious coexistence of different sections. I think it's time for me to wind up. Anyway, education should foster egalitarian attitudes, bringing about equal and better opportunities for women, differently abled, the SCs, the STs, and other backward sections. Let us put up joint struggles to defend democratic principles and right of students and teachers. Let us defend the secular traditions of our nation with utmost commitment and a scope of unity, obviously unity colored by the rich diversity, plurality and polyphony of our nation. Tamil Nadu and Kerala and other states in the south should march forward hand in hand to build up resistance against such elitist and over-centralized attitudes propagated by the present NEP. With these words, I once again extend my greetings to all of you and conclude my speech. Thank you.
உன் கடவுளை விட உன் சாஸ்திரத்தை விட உன் முன்னோரை விட உன் வெங்காயம் விளக்கமாத்தை விட உன் அறிவு பெருசு அதை சிந்தி